This is Street Knowledge with Chris Graham.
Welcome to the podcast. I am Chris Graham, and I'm joined, of course, it's Monday, and we're going to do this every Monday. Jeff Fife is joining me here. We're going to talk a lot of stuff. Jeff, welcome.
Thank you very much. Great to be here with you, Chris. And next Monday we won't be together simply because it'll be Christmas. We'll be doing Christmas cheer. But so we'll get a week's worth of fun in here with this podcast this week. And still lots to talk about. Not only UVA sports, but tinkering last weekend's wrestling pay-per-view and some things that may be coming up in the world of WWE. So let's just get right back into it. Last week we talked a little bit about the potential for rust with UVA, and it didn't occur to me when we were chatting there that Davidson is one of the few colleges that took a similar break. You know, we went from rust to rolling. It was nice to get a 20-point victory against a game Davidson team. What were your observations of that, and did they exceed your expectations coming off that exam break?
Well, yeah, and both teams coming off a similar exam break. They had both played their previous game on December 5th. Davidson also an academic school, so the two teams both come in cold, so to speak, and credit to both, Bob McKillop and Tony Bennett for scheduling a tough game coming back. You can come back with a sort of a layup game, like Virginia's playing Savannah State tomorrow night, for example. You can come back with that kind of game, ease your way back in off your break, but no, they decide, hey, let's go the hard route, and the Cavs do so. A rough start. Davidson led by 8. It was 14-6 at the under 12 media timeout. The folks on Media Row with me were, oh, wow, here we go again. It's going to be a slog for this game. We've seen this Virginia team struggle to score in a couple games, most notably the Wisconsin game, only 49 points in a win, a 12-point win. And then they finished scoring 80. It was funny to see how quickly, once the offense got rolling, it really got rolling. Nigel Johnson had a career game, at least from his Virginia career standpoint, 22 points on the night, 14 in the first half. Kyle Guy kind of quiet in the first half, only 5 at the break, finishes with 19. Devin Hall, once again, he's just a consistent guy. He had a stretch in the second half where everything he was throwing towards the basket went in, finishes with 20 points in that game. So we talk about a Virginia team that had 3 guys right at or just below 20 points. An offensively challenged, supposedly Virginia team that after the game, Bob McKillop talked about. He's played this Virginia team. They played a 2-game series. I think it ended 2 seasons ago. So he played the Malcolm Brogdon, Anthony Gill, Mike Tobey group, Justin Anderson group. He played them twice and lost both games home and home, down in Charlotte and then up in Charlottesville. He thinks this is the best team he's played that Tony Bennett's had. So that says a lot because those 2 teams went to Sweet 16s and Elite 8s. And this team, of course, is a team that didn't start the season ranked as of today, 13th in the AP poll. So he thinks it's the best Virginia team he's seen. I think Bob McKillop's a guy who knows basketball a bit. He coached a guy named Steph Curry that you might have heard of. So he was impressed. And, the 60 surprises me as well. The 80 for Virginia surprises me. 1.25 points per possession. Best game for Virginia from a points per possession standpoint this season. 60 surprised me a bit, too, because that number seems high. Virginia teams don't give up 60 very often. But then you look at points per possession. Davidson scored .938 points per possession, not much above what Virginia normally gives up. They normally give up around .87 points per possession for a game. So, yeah, a little up, but Davidson's also a team that can put the ball in the hoop. I think that's a game that Virginia fans and certainly the Virginia program can feel good about.
You mentioned Nigel Johnson earlier as you started talking about the game, and not known when he was coming to us as a 3-point shooter. Was really stroking it against Davidson, and then notice in the second half he gets the starting nod over Todd Jerome. Talk a little bit about Tony's last week before going into ACC prep, and are you going to be watching the rotation closely? And is Jerome, who's been a little cold here, matter of fact, I would even put some of the West Virginia comeback or lack thereof on Ty there at the end with some turnovers and some bad decisions. Are we going to start to see, and should we be watching Jerome losing minutes to Nigel Johnson now?
Well, yeah. I don't even know if it's the cold as much as it is simply, I wrote a column about this after the West Virginia game. I think an issue for Todd Jerome is his senior season of high school was cut short by hip surgery turned into double hip surgery. In fact, had surgery on both of his hips. And there was an expectation coming into his season last year, his freshman season at UVA, that he may actually end up redshirting because of recovery. I mean, he had surgery on both of his hips. And if you remember last year, he didn't really emerge into playing into the rotation in any significant way until, I want to say it was around the Villanova game, which was around January 30th, 31st of last season. And, he played well in February and was an important part of the team in March. But he really eased into it. And that was a health issue as much as anything else. Recovery from double hip surgery. I think you still see some potentially lingering issues. I haven't, talked to him about it, and I don't expect they would tell anybody about it if you ask about it, to know if it's really something that is a health issue. But, really against West Virginia, it was pronounced that he just couldn't get the ball up the court against their pressure defense. West Virginia, under Bob Huggins, plays great pressure, man defense. They trap a lot, and he just couldn't get the ball up the court. So, I noticed in the Davidson game, Davidson is the opposite. Davidson doesn't press. They're not a defensive team. They're an offensive team. They work you to death with their constant on the offensive end with their constant screens and pick and pops and pick and rolls. And they're a tough team to guard, but they're not a great defensive team. And even that said, you saw the minutes for Jerome diminished. He was, I think, at 17 minutes. I'm trying to get my numbers to pull up right here, but I think he was around 17 minutes in that game, and Johnson played 26 minutes in that game. And as you pointed out, he started the second half. And so I don't think it was just the production from Johnson, And Johnson's not a guy. Now, you talked about he didn't come in known as a three-point shooter, but he did come in known as a scorer. He scored 11 points a game, averaged 11 points a game last year at Rutgers, but he scored 20 or more 7 times last year. I called him coming into the season. I kind of equated him to our microwave. If fans who remember Vinnie Johnson from the Bad Boys Detroit Pistons teams of the late 80s and into the 90s, a guy who came off the bench and scored. I looked at Johnson on this team as a guy who could do that for this team. We didn't think he would start. Jerome and Guy and Hall were ensconced in the backcourt, but Johnson was not going to not get some minutes, and he's gotten the minutes and he's starting to put the ball in the hoop. He's had a couple double-figure games recently, and so I'm wondering if these next 2 games coming up, Savannah State tomorrow night and Hampton on Friday, if I don't know that Tony's going to make a change. He still starts Jack Salt. We don't know why that is, but he still starts Jack Salt. I think he is not amenable to change in general, but that said, just because Salt will get the start doesn't mean he'll play 30 minutes a game either. And I think we might start to see that even though Jerome is probably going to be on the court when the tip goes up, that Johnson's going to see more and more minutes. He's already averaging over 20 minutes a game as a backcourt reserve. So I don't know. I think we might see more of Johnson as we get ready for ACC play.
The quest for the third scorer. We can say with pretty consistency now that Kyle Guy is a known entity this year with his scoring and not just being able to do it from behind the arc, but some quick first steps and attacking the basket. You get the sense that Hall is going to take that senior leadership and be the second scorer, and you can rely on him for a bucket when you need it, and he can get to the basket and get on the free throw line if need be. Nigel, putting up his hand for, hey, I could be the third scorer. Who else on that rotation do you expect, and do we need a consistent third scorer if we're going to have any success in the ACC?
I don't know if you need a consistent third scorer, but you do need a third scorer. Teams just can't get points from 2 guys. Even Virginia, which, wins games largely 60-54, when you're talking about ACC play, I mean, the scores are going to be low. Excuse me, I'm still lingering issues with the cold. But I think you've got a list of candidates. I mean, yeah, Hall on a nightly basis is going to give you 15 a night. Guy was going to give you 15 a night, and, of course, either of those guys can give you more on any given night. We've seen that Johnson can heat up. We saw that against Davidson. Excuse me again. We've got DeAndre Hunter, who had a really good game against Monmouth, I think it was, back earlier in the season. He's a guy that he hasn't really hit a shot since. I'm exaggerating a little bit there, but that game I think he was 7 of 8 from the floor, and since then he's not done much. I think once Jay Huff starts earning consistent minutes, which hasn't happened yet, he played 2 minutes against Davidson on Saturday. I think Huff, though, is a guy that clearly can put the ball in the basket. So, the frustrating thing is still Huff is the only guy that I think can consistently score as a post player, whether he scores in the post or not. He actually is a guy who scores more from the perimeter. But Diakite still is a guy that can score in the post. Hasn't really done it consistently. Wilkins has put up a couple double-digit games points-wise, but has not been consistent with it. Salt is not a guy who's going to do much for you except play defense and rebound and that kind of thing. So, you're going to get your points from Hall and from Gott. And Jerome, actually, let's give Jerome credit when he is healthy. And I'm not sure he's healthy. So, I'll put that caveat out there. But when he's healthy, he can score double digits. He's not going to be a lights-out scorer for you necessarily, but I think he's a guy that can put up 10 or 12 while he's running the offense. So, excuse me, still having the issues here with coughing. But, I think you got two guys, and then you cobble together a third guy, maybe a third, a fourth, and a fifth guy who kind of equate to your third guy. So I think that there is that is certainly an issue for this team, though.
It'll be interesting to see moving forward, especially as they get into ACC play. Is Nigel going to hold up against some of the bigger, more physical ACC guards? He's going to see, who wants to step up? And is it okay for Virginia to get the third scorer from anyone in particular throughout the course of that? And maybe it's Hunter one week. Maybe it's Diakite. I still think Diakite, a.k.a. Dice K, Diakite could have a real impact on the offense of Virginia, even in some post presence. Mm-hmm. We're missing the Memphis kids still with not a true post scorer. That Memphis transfer that seemed to
Austin Nichols, yeah.
Yeah, Lord knows what happened to Austin, but he ain't around anymore.
Well, and this team 2 years ago, and we see Nichols was supposed to step in and play the role that Anthony Gill played for this team. Because in basketball in general, I keep saying this, and I really believe it's true. So I'm not just making an excuse for Tony Bennett and for Virginia, but most teams in high-level college basketball in the NBA, you don't have a lot of guys who score in the post anymore. That's just the way it is. The Golden State Warriors, think of who scores in the post for Golden State. Nobody. Steph Curry's a perimeter player. Kevin Durant at 7 feet tall is a perimeter player. Draymond Green shoots threes and distributes the ball. They don't dump the ball in the post and score. When you think of the NBA, think of the most prominent post scorer right now is probably Dwight Howard, and he's probably on his 8th or 9th team, because teams that trade for Dwight Howard as the solution in the post find out, oh, well, you dump the ball in the post and he clogs up the middle and we can't drive to the basket, we can't run our offense, so he gets traded to the next team. It's somebody else's problem. So, really the only two teams of prominence in college basketball that still play dump the ball in the post, score at basketball, North Carolina and Gonzaga. Now, they both played the championship game last year, so it tells you there's still value.
And Duke's got two big post players.
They got post players, but they got beat by Boston College, a team that doesn't have post players, a team that has guards who shoot threes. And Duke's problem, we'll talk about the ACC more thoroughly in a few minutes, but Duke's problem is those two post players, and the way the game's played right now, so many teams play what used to be threes as now stretch fours. You got the Jerron Blossom game model. I talk about Jerron Blossom a lot. I love the guy. I voted for him twice in the last 2 years, first team All-ACC, because he kills Virginia every time he plays. I'm glad he's in the NBA right now. But he's a 6'7" 3 who plays 4 now in college at least, because teams don't have 6'10" 4s anymore who just stand in the post and ask for the ball to be passed to them on the block and then do a drop step or a hook shot. 4s now are expected to run around screens. I don't know if you got to watch a Davidson game. You probably did on TV. Their 5 was running screens. The reason Jack Salt didn't play much on Saturday was because I was watching. I would isolate just what I was watching in the game from being in the arena, and watching Jack Salt fighting through screens on the perimeter was hilarious. He's 7 feet tall, 250 pounds, trying to chase a guy around, because that's what Davidson does. Most college teams do that these days. And when you think about Virginia again, I think that this Virginia team, when it's going to be at its fullest, its best operating capacity, and I'm assuming this is still going to happen. We haven't seen it happen yet, but when Jay Huff, he's going to get minutes eventually this year. I really think in February he's going to finally, the light's going to go off, he's going to get some minutes. And when he's out there at 7 feet tall, setting screens and then popping to the three-point line and making teams respect him out there, and then he can, I mean, we've seen it, it's in stretches. He can dribble drive to the basket. He can either distribute to Kyle. You're going to see plays where he fakes a three, puts the ball on the floor, gets in the lane, and kicks it out to Kyle Guy for a three. You know, the exact opposite of how basketball was played many years ago when it was the guard who would penetrate in addition to a 7-footer dunking the ball, basically. You know, basketball's backwards now, and you're not going to change that. So, you know, Diakite, Huff are guys who can score from the perimeter. Isaiah Wilkins has made threes this year. So, you know, your points in the post tend to come from your guards driving to the basket. And you know, Virginia the other day against Davidson, and Davidson as well. I mean, I think the final points, my internet's not working right now on my computer, so this is from memory, but I know it's the accurate memory. Points in the post, 34-32 Virginia in that game, 80-60 final score. 34 points for Virginia post, 32 for Davidson in post. Now, Jack Salt didn't score. Isaiah Wilkins had 5 points, I think it was. Diakite had 5 points, and we got 34 points in the post. So they still come. They just don't come the way they used to come. And so, you know, the Dukes of the Dukes of the college basketball world almost at a disadvantage. I mean, I've watched enough Duke this year to know that, you know, Coach K is going zone with his Duke team because those 2 7-footers can't guard anybody. And so the best way to disguise being not having 2 guys on the floor who are offensive powerhouses but can't guard anybody is you play a zone. Well, Boston College exploited the hell out of that a week and a half ago, and they're 0-1 in the ACC, and they've got 17 more to go against teams that are better than Boston College, that are better able to exploit 2 guys who can't play defense, who are good offensive players. So, you know, the ACC is going to be a lot more wide open. I'm kind of skipping ahead here a little bit, but the ACC is going to be a lot more wide open because of the way basketball is played now.
Well, BC, as you referenced, beating Duke, Virginia Tech going into Kentucky and giving them fits, an offensive explosion. I thought for sure that Virginia Tech was scoring on some weak sisters, but boy, they go into Kentucky, and Kentucky doesn't show me much on the defensive side of things either. Virginia Tech just looks great. So now I'm looking at the first 2 games of the ACC slate with BC and Tech and thinking which 2 games are going to be tougher for Virginia, BC and Tech, or the 2 after that, North Carolina and Syracuse.
At least Carolina and Syracuse are home games. Now, BC's a home game as well. Tech's on the road. I don't overlook Tech no matter what their record is going into a game in Blacksburg because that's a tough place to play. I've been to games down there, and the way that arena is set up, it's a small arena. It holds maybe 9,000. I don't have the numbers right in front of me, but it's a small arena. It's an old arena. It's an old airplane hangar, from the World War II era that they repurposed into a basketball arena, and all the seats are right on top of the floor because it's small, and they squeeze in as many as they can. The build of it, I'm kind of making a hand signal with like an arc, and so the sound collects and goes right back down to the floor. The student section there, they put right behind and above the visiting team bench. So I have covered games there sitting courtside, and it is impossible to hear in the second half of a game when the way teams play. You can choose. I mean, I'd love to see an opposing coach choose to actually go towards the student section in the first half and to go the other way second half. You tend to want to, the visiting team coach has a choice, and you tend to choose, hey, I want my offense in front of me in the second half, so if I have to change a play, I can just, they can look over at me right away and see that I'm there. But I don't know. I almost might want to play offense the other way second half just so I'm not having to play offense into that sound. It's a tough place to play. And Virginia, lost there last year, a double overtime game where the ball's still hanging on the rim from Fuentes' last shot that would have won the game, I think, in the first overtime. But now that said, Virginia Tech, they went to Kentucky, played a great game. I expected they would, not because, though, that, they played Sisters of the Week for the first 6 weeks of the season. And then, they're stepping up to play Kentucky. Kentucky's not last year's Kentucky. They're not 2 years ago's Kentucky either. That's the problem you get when you're John Calipari and you have to recruit a new team every year. Some years you get great kids, and some years you don't. And I think we're seeing the 2 one-and-done teams, Kentucky and Duke, are struggling pretty much defensively. That's the big issue for them. At Virginia, the kids have 4 years to learn the pack line defense. At Kentucky, they've got 2 weeks to learn how to play defense. And you don't go to Kentucky or Duke to play defense. You go to Kentucky or Duke to get drafted in the lottery. So, and you don't get drafted in the lottery by playing defense. You get drafted in the lottery by dunking and shooting threes. So that said, Tech's always tough. BC is very interesting now, much more interesting than it looked on the schedule. Carolina and Syracuse. Syracuse actually is playing surprisingly good basketball right now. So I just look up and down the ACC roster, though, outside of maybe Georgia Tech and maybe Wake Forest. I don't see an easy one on the whole schedule. So, Clemson is on the edge of the top 25 right now. I mean, yeah, it's going to be a challenge this year for anybody to get through the ACC. Certainly unscathed, or even minimally scathed this year.
Tough sledding to go unscathed for sure. And some heavy-duty punching going on, making my transition into the world of WWE. What podcast can you get quality ACC sports, Virginia basketball, and then go straight into the WWE? It's a beautiful thing. Your radio friend from Florida, is it Moses?
Mark Moses, yeah.
Would be loving this right now.
Yes, he would.
So
he always lures me in to talk, whatever football or basketball we talk, and then let me throw a question at you, Chris, real quick at the end here about WWE. Yeah.
Well, let's do that. Let's talk. I mean, we had the Clash of Champions this weekend. These pay-per-views, there must be 6, 8 of them now. Well, Lord knows how many there are this in a calendar year now with the WWE Network, and just sort of a change of flavor for the WWE. Anything jump out of you out of the Clash of Champions, a best match, something that surprised you? We'll get into the more of the guest officials here next, but specific to some of the matches.
The card overall was underwhelming, but even the way it was laid out was underwhelming. So in that sense, they met expectations which were low. The surprise that stood out to me was actually the main event, AJ Styles and Jinder Mahal. I wasn't surprised that Styles won cleanly, because I expected that. I was surprised that the ending had Mahal tapping out to lose, because that completes his burial at this stage. Mahal lost the belts last month leading up to Survivor Series, which was a surprise. WWE had been building, the Survivor Series outside of the 2 traditional Survivor Series matches, the men's match and the women's match that involved the elimination tag teams. The others were champion versus champion matches. And so WWE had been very lustily building up Jinder Mahal versus Brock Lesnar, the 2 champions, 2 big, strong-looking guys. And then they got scared because there was no buzz about Mahal versus Lesnar. So they quickly took the belt off Mahal, gave it to Styles right before Survivor Series. And also the timing was odd because, the whole thinking about Jinder Mahal being the champion, he's actually of Indian descent. He's not actually from India. He's actually from Canada, but he's of Indian descent. And WWE was, after Survivor Series, going on a tour of India. And so he won the belt 5 months ago, and the thinking all along was, well, of course he won the belt. They're going to have him be the champion until the India tour. Give him a chance to build up his name and everything else, and they'll go and make all kinds of money in India. Well, he lost the belt before going to India. Then the thought was, okay, so they'll probably take the belt back from him, back from Styles, put it back on Mahal before India, or maybe in India. Wouldn't that be interesting? Have him win the belt in India. Well, instead of that, they had him job to Triple H in India, which makes no sense. Triple H isn't even an active wrestler. So all of a sudden you go from Mahal's champion, he's getting ready to wrestle Lesnar at Survivor Series, main event of the show. Now he's not there. He's not even on the show anymore. He, in fact, did not wrestle on Survivor Series. Goes to India, jobs to a part-timer, Triple H, and then last night taps out and loses to AJ Styles. So I don't know what he did. I think I said to my wife after the show was over, he must have said something bad about one of Stephanie McMahon's kids, because he is now. I mean, he's not even going to go down. He's not even going to go down a mid card. I mean, he's probably he could go to NXT for all they know right now. He did something, and he's persona non grata right now in WWE.
He's been sent to the Siberia version of the
yes.
of wrestling.
He might be hanging out with Big Show out there in the middle of nowhere right
There's a Big Show. Well, we talked about Daniel Bryan last week and him sort of creeping back into the WWE lexicon and how they were going to use him. You had predicted, him and Shane McMahon building something up for something bigger. What did you get? Did you sense anything larger coming? How did that storyline play out?
Oh, it played out exactly like a lot of us thought. I won't take credit for being the only person to think this way, but the way the match ended, Shane McMahon, and now the only question I've got is which side are each going to go on, because I thought it had been playing out that McMahon would take the face role, the baby face role, and that somehow they were turning Bryan heel in a way, because the way they were acting, he's been aligning with Kevin Owens and Sami Zayn, who feel like heels because the way they started out. To quickly recap, Shane McMahon wrestled against Kevin Owens at Hell in a Cell, and Shane did his thing where he falls off the cell, attempting to do an elbow drop. And Sami Zayn surprisingly comes out of nowhere to pull Kevin Owens away as McMahon's falling off the cage, and that saves Kevin from taking the blow, and then he wins the match. And so that felt like a heel turn from Sami Zayn, so all of a sudden Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens are a heel tag team, and McMahon's been trying to fire them for the last few weeks because of they also turned on the SmackDown roster, the walk-up to the Survivor Series. Everybody was on the same team. SmackDown people were aligned together no matter whether they were heel or face because they were going to wrestle the Raw team. Well, Zayn and Owens sort of backed out. They chicken-heeled their way out of being part of that team. And so, they were definitely on the outs for the rest of the SmackDown roster. So McMahon was using that as an excuse. We're going to fire you. So the stipulation going into last night was if they lost the tag team match to Shinsuke Nakamura and Randy Orton, they were fired from WWE. And McMahon set himself storyline-wise as the special guest referee. Well, Bryan's been defending those guys, saying, hey, we can't fire these guys. They're talented wrestlers. We're not going to fire them. And so he established himself as a second guest referee. Well, the way the match played out last night, Shane McMahon healed it up in terms of trying to make, put obstacles in the way of Zayn and Owens having a fair fight. And Bryan resisted as the second referee, awkward as it is, having two referees in a match. But so as much of the interplay in the match was between those two as it was between the two tag teams wrestling each other. And it got to the end where McMahon's last transgression against Sami Zayn and Kevin Owens in terms of creating more obstacles in their way, Bryan intervened for the last time, and he and McMahon had a pushing, shoving match with each other, and in the distraction, in the chaos, Sami Zayn rolled up Randy Orton in a quick pinning attempt, and Daniel Bryan counted to 3 in about 1.2 seconds, and ran out of the ring with the two heels, who I now might think are faces, and there's definitely more story coming up between those two factions, if you want to say. All that said, the only question I've got, because what happened in terms of between Bryan and McMahon, I expected. I just don't know now who are the face and who are the heels. So that's going to be that's going to play out between now and Royal Rumble, no question.
Be worth watching and seeing now that it happens. You've started to express some enthusiasm for a not new wrestling league, but a league that is getting some interesting momentum and push from the States. Mm-hmm. Wrestle Kingdom 12, the New Japan Pro Wrestling. I just see you get excited talking about this kid, Kenny Omega, which tell us a little bit about Omega and the feature match that's going to be coming up here at the Wrestle Kingdom 12 on January 4th.
Yeah, New Japan Pro Wrestling has been around in one form or another since the 1970s. Antonio Inoki, who came to fame, at least as far as the United States is concerned, he participated in one of those wrestler versus boxer matches against Muhammad Ali in '76. He was Japan's most famous wrestler. He's the father of New Japan Pro Wrestling. And I think it was formerly in 1992 he broke his his brand of wrestling off from another Japanese company and officially formed New Japan. And a lot of American wrestling nerds have been trading tapes. I mean, back in the VHS era, you would have to actually buy tapes from mail order companies in Japan, get them sent back over. Then there was a big trading business going on for a long time. And so, fans of and some really prominent U.S. wrestlers made their names in Japan. Even up until recent years, AJ Styles, after leaving TNA Impact Wrestling, became a multi-time champion in New Japan Pro Wrestling before WWE signed him away. Shinsuke Nakamura came from New Japan Pro Wrestling. That was where his whole career was until getting signed into WWE a couple years ago. And I'm sure I'm leaving a lot of guys off when I talk about those are two names that are most prominent right now. But Hulk Hogan did tours of New Japan. I mean, so a lot of Ric Flair has wrestled a number of matches in Japan over the years. But now New Japan in just about the last year or so is really targeting the U.S. market. They have a weekly show on Access TV, which is one of those upper tier channels that if you have cable, you probably don't know you have, but you do. It's the network actually owned by Mark Cuban. And Jim Ross is the U.S. announcer, the English language announcer for the shows on Access TV. And they've really been making a push. They actually promoted some shows in the States last year. They've crowned a U.S. champion. They call it IWGP International Wrestling Grand Prix U.S. champion. It's Kenny Omega. Now, Omega's a guy he's from Canada. He wrestled his original gimmick I think he's been in wrestling since 2002, 2003. His original gimmick, he was a surfer guy, and that's where he created the Kenny Omega character. Bleach blonde hair, carried a surfboard to the ring. I mean, wore jam shorts and everything else. He's kept the name, but he doesn't have the persona. Now he's the cleaner Kenny Omega. He's sort of a hitman kind of character now. He had a cup of coffee in WWE developmental when they still did when Deep South Wrestling in Alabama was their developmental territory back in 05, 06. He credits his time in developmental, even though they released him more than 10 years ago. A couple of trainers there, he said, really put him on the right path towards becoming a much better wrestler. He's been in Japan long enough though that he speaks Japanese fluently, and he's the biggest star in the world. Japanese wrestling world, and those U.S. fans who know him, he's head and shoulders the best wrestler, the best performer in the world. The wrestling journalist Dave Meltzer, who has been in the wrestling journalism business long enough that when he was a teenager, he started his first newsletter. He's been 35 years a wrestling journalist. Newsletter days, before internet, before anything else. Again, kind of like the Japanese tapes you had to trade with your buddies VHS-wise. Meltzer has established, and has long since established, a rating system for matches, 1 to 5 stars, 0 to 5 stars, I guess. When Kenny Omega wrestled at Wrestle Kingdom 11 last year against Okada, the champion of IWGP, New Japan Pro Wrestling, the Meltzer gave that match, infamously, very controversially, 6 stars on his 0 to 5 star scale. And his reasoning was, I have given maybe 5 or 6 matches over the 30 years 5 stars. This match was so much better than any of those 5-star matches. I can't give this a 5-star rating and have it mean anything. I've got to give it 6 stars. They wrestled a rematch in April of last year, those two, Okada and Omega. That was better than the 6-star match. He gave it 6.25 stars. I've watched these matches. The New Japan Wrestling now, with the English language version, they've now crowned Omega their U.S. champion. They have an app that's available, just like the WWE Network app. It's 999 yen per month, which is $9.11, so it's okay. You're not going to go broke getting it. But they have all their matches archived, Japanese commentary and English commentary. So if unless you're like me and you didn't realize there was English commentary, I watched 2 matches in Japanese before I realized, oh yeah, if you click one over, there's actually English commentary on there, which is good. But they're really making an aggressive push now because, okay, so those of us who are the wrestling nerds know about New Japan. They know about Kenny Omega. They know about Okada. The push now is Chris Jericho has signed to work with this company. Chris Jericho. It's the behind the scenes of that I'm still kind of trying to figure out. But Jericho is going to wrestle Omega in one of the main events of the Wrestle Kingdom 12, which is the Japanese equivalent of WrestleMania. It'll be in the Tokyo Dome. Last year's show sold 65,000 seats. They'll sell 65,000 again this year. Omega versus Jericho, and they're setting this up traditional U.S. feud style. Omega defeated Trent Beretta at a recent show. Their November pay-per-view. I've lost the name of it, what it was. After that match, Jericho challenged Omega. At the end of the December pay-per-view show, Omega was part of a six-man tag team with the Young Bucks, the best tag team in the world you've never seen if you've not seen any New Japan Wrestling. He won a six-man match. Jericho actually attacked him after that match. And it was a surprise. Nobody knew he actually flew to Japan for this show. So brutally attacked him, left him in a bloody heap in the ring. And so now it's on. Now it's on. Jericho's there. Now the question for a lot of U.S. fans is, Jericho is still in good graces with WWE. It hadn't been that long. He wrestled on Survivor Series. He's expected to be back at WrestleMania. So there are U.S. fans certainly speculating, is it possible that this is a setup for something that could involve Omega making an appearance in WWE? I don't think so. I think Omega makes too much money in New Japan. But yeah, they're making a push, and it should be interesting to see. And I definitely want to have some of my wrestling friends over to see this because, trust me, this wrestling is that good. Well,
Disney bought Fox, so maybe WWE can go get Omega. Who knows?
The thing about that is when you see the economics out there, when you see them selling 65,000 seat arenas, for these shows, they're doing what WWE does. Some of their headliners. Now I'm gonna be a real wrestling nerd. I wouldn't want Omega to come to WWE because the kind of matches they put on, WWE wouldn't know how to put on. The reason I say that these guys, Omega and Okada, Okada's going to have the other main event of Wrestle Kingdom 12 is going to be Okada versus Naito, the former world champion in IWGP. The move sets they do, you see John Cena, you've seen his 4 moves, you've seen them all. He'll do 3 or 4 AAs to put a guy out, the attitude adjustment move. These guys have legitimately 8, 10, 12 finishers, any one of which could be the finisher. And so it comes out of nowhere. The matches are because they allow those guys to use so many different moves, and all of them look so devastating. It's so impressive the way they work. There are so many more permutations, and that's why the matches end up being 5 and 6 and 6.25 star matches, because it's not the same 3 or 4 moves. Undertaker against John Cena. Okay, we're going to see 3 or 4 tombstones, a couple choke slams, a couple AAs, the 5-knuckle shuffle, and we've seen it all. There's just not much that can happen outside of that. Versus these matches where they've got so many different moves they can do to each other. So many more permutations of things that can happen. WWE would dumb that down so much that Omega wouldn't be worth it. So I don't want to see him come to WWE. I want to see him stay in New Japan because I want to see more of these 5 and 6 star matches with these guys.
Interesting. Well, and a lot of it is about money and corporate positioning. McMahon is one of the greatest entrepreneur and businessmen out there, and how he convinces his son to jump off of giant cages and cells, I have no idea. That must be some interesting family dynamics. But some interesting news coming out of WWE, or just out of the general politics, is the XFL rumor mill floating out there. And I will give you a precursor. You talk about wrestling nerds. I am an XFL nerd. I won a fantasy championship in XFL.
I did not know that existed.
There was fantasy football for that 1 year XFL, and I just happened to get lucky and get Rashad Salam and Parker, the Alabama quarterback.
You didn't have He Hate Me, I bet.
Oh, I did have Rod
You had He Hate Me, okay.
I was killing it. I had the best wide receiver, running back. Everyone in fantasy was like, you have to play a national fantasy league for XFL because there isn't a local group of 10 guys.
So you were the Matt Berry of XFL fantasy, huh?
I was killing it. It wasn't even fun for everybody. I did homework. It was a scary thing. So I was excited to see the XFL potentially coming back because I think the NFL needs a bit of a wake-up call, but I see you shaking your head. What are you thinking about the XFL's legitimacy?
Well, one, it lasted a year for a reason. I mean, you know, the first three or 4 weeks, ratings-wise, it did great because people just wanted to see what it was. And, you know, whatever motivation there would be. And, you know, the reason I'm shaking my head, one, is, you know, Vince McMahon, among other things, he's a great businessman. He's also good at getting attention to himself. And somebody found out. So they didn't put a press release out saying, hey, we registered a trademark for XFL. Somebody had to sneak around and find, you know, somebody got a tip, I guess, because you wouldn't just look for trademark applications and find, oh, yeah, Vince McMahon or somebody in WWE filed a trademark application for XFL. That's how the story came out, was that, you know, somebody enterprising, tipped or whatever else, found out that there was a trademark application, and now, you know, further commenting, Deadspin asked a question of WWE Corporate. WWE Corporate says, yeah, you know, we have, you know, Vince McMahon has formed a sports entertainment company to further explore options in other sports, including investment opportunities in football. So, yes, okay, reading lots and lots of tea leaves, could be XFL coming back. It didn't do well the first time. It lost big money the first time. And think about what its appeal was when it came out the first time. We're going to be a more brutal version of football. Well, right now, I mean, if you're of the mindset, and there are plenty of people who are, oh yeah, well they're putting skirts on the quarterbacks and they're, you know, all these penalties for targeting and all this stuff. Well, okay, that's fine. You know, if you don't like that style of football, I tell each of you people out there who has that opinion, go out there and let yourself get hit real hard like that one time, and your pansy ass will also put a dress on, and you also be asking for the targeting penalty to be called, because there's a reason football has gotten more protective over the years. We now know what we didn't know in 2001 or 2002 with XFL. We didn't know anything about concussions and the long-term impact of brain injuries on former players and even current players. And so, you know, the whole idea of, like, you know, it was innovative at the time. You know, let's not do a coin toss. What was it? They basically threw the ball up in the air. Made
Two guys running for it. Yes.
You know, the kickoffs had to be returned unless they were kicked through the end zone. You know, we know now, of course, that the kickoff coverage is the most dangerous play in football.
They gave us the Madden angle, however. You know, what I call with the gaming angle with the football. So there was some innovations with XFL in the way they covered the sport.
Well, and the Thursday Night Football has accidentally gotten into that too, when the game a few weeks ago that had this fog, and they had to use the cam that goes over the field. I can't think of the name of the cam that goes over the field, but they had to use that because the sideline cameras couldn't get the game because of the fog. And so, you know, sometimes you luck into those things. Yeah, you know, I mean, also there are players out there, obviously. I mean, NFL rosters have, what is it? Is it 50, including the practice squads, 58 times 32, so you're talking 1,800, 1,900 guys who are actively involved in the NFL. You know, they could franchise the heck out of it if Colin Kaepernick could be their franchise quarterback.
That was the name in the back of my head. I wouldn't be calling trademark folks. I wouldn't be calling the WWE office. I'd be calling Colin Kaepernick and going, has anybody contacted you to play any football with this new league?
Except that if this was the story was broken, and here's where you start getting conspiracy theories kind of thing. Who got tipped here? The person who broke the story and as a result had to be the one who got tipped is a political reporter, is a conservative political commentator. And so, you know, he's not a guy who's, again, I've been a reporter for over 20 years, and I don't do this level of reporting myself anymore. But back in the old days when, you know, I was sitting around looking for stories, I mean, you would do things like troll the court records to see whose name might be in there, or a guy who's a national sports reporter might be trolling trademark applications to see, hey, what's going on here? It's a slow day. Let's find some news. He didn't troll. This guy wasn't trolling for sports news. This guy was fed a political story. Vince McMahon is a stalwart supporter of Donald Trump politically, financially, everything else. And so this is a dig, is what this is. This is a dig at the NFL. And the NFL, Roger Goodell, I could promise you right now, is not quaking in his boots at the prospect of Vince McMahon trying to restart an XFL. And then people who cover sports business and sports entertainment business say WWE's not doing well right now. Let's just be honest about that. We were talking about, New Japan challenging them on the one front. On the other front, their TV ratings for the USA Network shows down big time. They're not getting 3 million viewers a week consistently, or even any week right now. When back in the heyday of the 90s, the Monday Night Wars, both WCW and WWE were drawing 8 million plus a week on TV. So they're they're about a third of where they were at their height 20 years ago. The WWE Network has nice numbers when you look at the bottom line subscriber numbers. A lot of those are freebies, and a lot of those are people who have multiple accounts, multiple email addresses, who are getting the free, and then just kind of going from one month to the next with a free account. There are a lot of indications that WWE business-wise isn't doing well. Why restart something that failed 15 years ago? There's a lot of questions. There's a lot of questions about it. Let's just put it that way.
I'll continue to watch with great interest because I haven't won a fantasy championship since then. Is that bad? I had I've won baseball. I haven't won football, and I could get into some XFL.
Well, your specialized knowledge of XFL could pay off. There's no question about that. Yeah.
When it comes back new, it's just all about research, is what that is. It's pretty insane. Well, so tell us what's going on with AFP this week. We've obviously got the holidays coming up. You guys got anything? You covering Savannah State and Hampton. You're going to Annapolis to watch the Military Bowl. You and Scott German. What can folks that are following the AFP expect here in the next week or two?
Yes. Excuse me. Again, the Savannah State game tomorrow night. Live blog. We did a Facebook live after the Davidson game that got good viewership. So we'll do a Facebook live again after Savannah State. We'll do those more consistently after ACC games. I'm out of town Friday. Scott will be the solo guy on Friday with Hampton, the big game with Hampton. But we're both, Scott and I are heading up to Annapolis next Thursday, so we got some work to do to get you ready for that game. We got to get ourselves ready for that game, to be honest. I'll have a couple columns out tomorrow and Wednesday. As Virginia, I think we talked about this last week. The focus the last couple of weeks had been on exams and then conditioning. They weren't really doing any practice. They're back to practice now, though. The team is starting to think about game planning and that kind of thing. Getting ready for Navy. And then I'm trying to think, is there anything else? I got a couple of podcasts scheduled. Normally we do the sports podcast here, but I'd scheduled a couple. I've got an interview with a documentary director tomorrow, Rick Osuna. I screened a documentary that it was looking at politics in 2017 documentary, so we'll have that tomorrow. And then I'm talking on Wednesday with Chris Kane formerly from the Stanton Creative Community Fund, but now part of an effort to start a business incubator in Stanton. So some news podcasts coming up. And then next week we'll talk more sports.
More sports. So a little bit of everything on AFP and Street Knowledge. You can get both news, politics, sports, and WWE. I guess we put that under the entertainment category. XFL discussion. What other podcast?
XFL fantasy discussion. You can't get more specific than that.
Get that anywhere. Holy cow. Well, you guys stay close to AFP for all of your sports, politics, news, entertainment, and XFL fantasy chat, and have a fantastic week.